today. So, Mr. Andrews.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Kane, Vice Chairman Hamilton, members of the Commission. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you today and to assist in a small way in furthering your important work. As requested, I provided the staff with written testimony, and today I would like to highlight several issues and respond to the specific topics that the staff have asked me to address. The National Center for Crisis and Continuity Coordination, or NC4, is a division of Candle Corporation, an El Segundo, California-based technology company. Candle initially became interested in public-private collaboration during the preparations for Y2K, when we noted that while government and companies were paying a great deal of attention to issues within their organization at the national or state level, little was being done to ensure that local coordination occurred. Following September 11th, when many of Candle's clients within the financial services sector were directly impacted by the attacks, Candle formed a new corporate division, or NC4, specifically focused on enhancing the coordination between the public and private sectors on issues related to prevention, preparedness, response and recovery for natural and man-made disasters. Over the past 18 months, NC4 has centered its attention in New York City and Los Angeles, working with the business communities and local governments. While there is much focus on Homeland Security coordination across federal agencies and from the federal to the state level, our objective is to address the gaps in local coordination between the public and private sectors. The important word here is local. The private sector has their offices, their processing facilities, and their manufacturing plants in local communities. Our view is that it is imperative that efforts to build partnerships between the public and private sectors be rooted in local communities. Unless solutions are forged at the local level, it is our experience that partnerships between the public and private sectors are unlikely either to be achieved or, even more importantly, sustained. There are many obvious challenges in working at the local level. For businesses, the jurisdictional complexities of local governments, especially in metropolitan regions like New York or Los Angeles, can be overwhelming. For local government, the private sector can be equally mysterious. Organizational structures are often poorly understood. The distinct functions of corporate security, business continuity, facilities operation, or emergency management within the private sector may not be clearly recognized by public agencies. The initial role that NC4 has played is to facilitate the process of bringing business and government together to initiate a dialogue regarding what steps need to be taken to develop workable relationships that are mutually beneficial. We have found that there's a need for very basic discussions to occur. What information is available from government, from what government agency, and in what format? Can that information be shared with businesses, and if so, under what circumstances? What are the cultural, procedural, policy, or legal barriers to information sharing? What information does the private sector have that it can share in turn with government? And what information would government like to receive from the private sector? These exchanges have been carried out through facilitated discussions and tabletop exercises that focus on specific public policy problems that have the potential to impact both sectors. In late October, for example, we conducted a 3-hour simultaneous bicoastal exercise in New York and Los Angeles that centered on a simulated anthrax attack that impacted corporate offices and local governments in both cities. Because neither government nor business are able to have full-time staff dedicated to promoting the interaction between the two sectors, NC4 has served in effect as an intermediary or program manager to bring the groups together to initiate this exchange. In New York, our efforts have centered on the financial services sector, while in Los Angeles, we've been working with a range of businesses, including aerospace and entertainment firms, as well as representatives of the banking and utility sectors. In New York, we have worked with the city's Office of Emergency Management to develop an application that refines the processes used by OEM's Watch Command, which is a 24/7 operational arm of the Office of Emergency Management, responsible for monitoring events throughout the city that have the potential to impact public safety. By using the NC4 application, OEM is able to rapidly and consistently enter, log, update, and as appropriate, disseminate information to the private sector. An essential element of this effort involves the daily use of the information processes. And I think particularly in the previous testimony, one of the things that is, I think, a hallmark of emergency preparedness is the need to have, as close as possible, daily practice. When extraordinary events like September 11 occur, or extraordinary events like the fires that occurred in California several weeks ago, unless there's been systems of daily practices, and we heard about Merrill Lynch and their practices, unless you build those daily practices into the routines of both public and private organizations, it's extremely unlikely that under the stress of unique and terrible circumstances that people are going to be able to perform the way that they need to perform. Even minor events like a water main break may have the potential to impact business operation. By providing reports to businesses of seemingly routine events, processes are steadily being developed whereby accessing the NC4 system becomes a regular part of both business and government routine. Additionally, the information flow is bidirectional. Businesses can in turn advise the Office of Emergency Management of the status of their facilities and personnel, or advise them of activities that might impact a specific area of the city. The staff has asked me to address the question of what are the areas where the public and private sector partnerships should be developed. And I think there are several areas that we should focus on as at least entry points for this dialogue to begin. One involves corporate security and local law enforcement. Strong informal networks generally exist among corporate security officers, many of whom themselves are former law enforcement officials. They represent in the corporate security community a significant force multiplier of eyes and ears to support prevention efforts. By formalizing the processes by which corporate security officers can provide information to law enforcement, we believe both public and private sector security can be enhanced. A renewed effort should be undertaken to expand participation in programs like InfraGard. In turn, law enforcement should consider providing law enforcement sensitive information to properly vetted representatives from the private sector. A second area involves bringing business continuity professionals into an overall public safety system. Once centered largely on ensuring the integrity of corporate data systems and networks, business continuity professionals need to work more closely with local economic development and public safety officials to develop a shared understanding of what is needed by each sector to ensure that the impacts of emergencies and disasters on local businesses are minimized. A third area involves closer coordination between emergency management officials in both sectors. Exercises involving both sectors need to be promoted. For example, currently, the top-off exercises that are held nationally focus entirely on public agencies. Private agencies are really not brought into these major exercises that test the overall national capability. A business incident command system should be developed that is compatible with the national incident command system that's underdeveloped by the Department of Homeland Security. And crisis management plans need to be developed for each critical infrastructure sector, and those plans need to be tested and evaluated with local, state, and federal planning efforts. What are the key private sector responsibilities in Homeland Security in working with the public sector? Let me add just a few comments to my earlier remarks. If we want the private sector to be a partner in government prevention, preparedness, and emergency response, there needs to be a simple interface to government that is viable and efficient for business to use. The multiplicity of government interfaces, as mentioned earlier, is a problem for business. For example, one of the most common requests from the financial services firms that we work with in New York City is for assistance in facilitating coordination with public agencies in New Jersey, as well as in New York, for example, with the previously mentioned Port Authority. Bridging these state lines becomes a very significant problem for businesses, particularly businesses that have operations that cross state lines. In turn, the private sector needs to recognize that their interests extend beyond the boundaries of their company and that protection of their physical facilities and their employees is dependent upon developing and maintaining close working relationships with local public safety authorities. These efforts will be enhanced if government can consider providing incentives to defray the additional expenses to strengthen the resiliency of the nation's critical infrastructure. What are the key pillars or building blocks that support public-private partnerships? The first is the developing systems that deliver accurate, timely,
If you could sum up now, Mr. Andrews, we're running out of time.
Okay. I think the most challenging part of the process to develop workable networks between the public and private sector is simply beginning the dialogue. Where there are examples of private-public partnerships, there usually has been an intermediary. In Dallas, for example, the FBI has taken the leadership in bringing business community together in North Texas. The challenge is to sustain the effort and to develop the institutional knowledge and accumulate a library of best practices and move from information sharing to more formalized, structured, and commonly understood methods of interaction.